The SOS in the void. The void of space was silent, endless and cold, yet one night it was broken by a signal. It was faint, filled with static, but it carried desperation. Across the black the message repeated, words fractured, voices trembling, begging. Please, help us. They are coming. The signal stretched far beyond its home system, bouncing off relays, drifting into the territories of many species. Most ignored it. Some feared it. A few listened. But when they understood the tone of terror, they shut down their receivers. No one wanted to be the one to answer. On the great stations of the Galactic Council, the leaders gathered. Alien delegates with shining scales, soft fur, or shimmering eyes whispered among themselves. They debated quietly, and their words were always the same. It is too dangerous, one said. Why should we risk our fleets for strangers? Another muttered, what if it is a trap? Many agreed. The chamber was filled with fear. None wished to send their soldiers into the unknown. The vote was cast and the decision was final. The SOS would be ignored. The signal would be left to fade in the endless night, but the signal did not stop. It traveled further, and on the edge of the Orion Arm it reached human space. In a listening post orbiting a small moon, a lone technician named Harris picked it up. At first he thought it was just another burst of cosmic noise, but when he cleared the static, the voice grew sharper. It was crying, it was pleading. Please, they are burning us. We cannot hold. Someone, anyone. Harris froze. This was no ordinary distress call, this was terror turned into sound. He forwarded it to command immediately. Within hours, the message reached Earth's defense network. Admirals, generals, and analysts gathered in war rooms. They played the signal again and again, each time the words cut deeper. The aliens were dying, their worlds burning, and no one had come. No one, except humans. Earth's leaders knew what the Galactic Council had already decided. Cowards would not move. But Deathworlders were not cowards. They had risen from a world of storms, predators, and endless struggle. They knew the voice of desperation because it was once their own. Earth would not ignore this call. In the cold night, preparations began. Orders were sent to the great shipyards. Engines roared as massive human warships were awakened. The Resolute, the Iron Dawn, the Valiant, and many more began to gather. Their black hulls gleamed under starlight, carrying scars of old battles. Soldiers filled the decks, strapping into armor, checking weapons, whispering among themselves. Rumors spread through the fleet. They say the Council ignored it. Of course they did, but we're going. Yes, we're going. Among the soldiers, there was no fear, only grim acceptance. Humans had been called Deathworlders by the galaxy, a name spoken with both insult and respect. It meant they were dangerous, unpredictable, and too hard to kill. Now they would show what that name truly meant. Back on the listening post, Harris listened again to the message. He imagined the world behind that voice, a planet burning, cities falling, people screaming under alien skies. He wondered if the humans would arrive in time. He wondered if the survivors would still be alive when the fleet reached them. And he wondered what kind of enemy could inspire such pure terror. The thought made his skin crawl. Because if the enemy could break entire civilizations, then only something worse than fear could stop them. And humans were very good at being worse than fear. The fleet assembled in orbit above Earth. Thousands gathered on the ground, staring up at the sky as fire lit the heavens. Parents held children, veterans saluted, and leaders watched in silence. The launch of the Deathworlder fleet was not just a mission, it was a promise. Humanity would not stand aside. The SOS had been heard, and it would be answered, not with mercy, but with fire. In the last hours before the jump, Admiral Reeves stood on the bridge of the Resolute. He looked out into the void, knowing millions of eyes across Earth were watching. He said, "Only one thing before the fleet jumped into hyperspace." "They begged for help," he whispered, "so we will give them fire." And then, the black swallowed the fleet. The stars bent and twisted, and humanity's answer began its journey through the void. The Council's cowardice. The Galactic Council chamber was vast, shining with crystal walls and silver pillars. From every corner of the galaxy, leaders sat in their floating seats dressed in the colors of their people. The SOS had reached them too, but unlike humans, they did not feel fire in their hearts. They felt only fear. The message played in the center of the chamber, a broken voice begging for help, screams mixing with static, the sound of weapons in the background, the cry of a dying world. When the signal ended, silence followed. No one wanted to speak first. Finally, a scaled delegate of the Varathi clicked, its jaws. "It is a trap," it hissed. "They want to lure us into a battlefield and slaughter our fleets." Others nodded quickly, too quickly. A furred representative of the Lenari twitched his ears. "We cannot risk our ships for strangers," he said. "Our own borders must come first." Whispers spread like a wave through the chamber. The cowardice was thick in the air. One bold voice rose, a crystalline envoy of the Kyler. "But if we ignore this call, what does it say about us?" she asked, her light pulsing. "We are supposed to be a council of unity, a force of peace. Do we abandon the weak when they cry out?" The chamber grew tense, but the response came cold. A reptilian delegate leaned forward, eyes narrow. "Peace does not mean sacrifice," he said. "Let the Deathworlders go if they wish. They have always loved war." Murmurs of agreement rippled across the room. The decision was clear even before the vote. They would do nothing. The SOS would be ignored by the so-called guardians of the galaxy, but in the back of the chamber, a human envoy stood. Ambassador Hale, tall and silent until now, rose with fire in his eyes. He slammed his fist against the table, the sound echoing like thunder. "Shame," he said, his voice cutting through the whispers. "Shame on all of you. While you debate and tremble, innocent lives burn. You sit on your golden chairs while families scream for mercy." The chamber erupted with angry shouts. "Sit down, Deathworlder," one voice spat. "You dare accuse us," another hissed. But Hale did not back down. "Humans will answer this call," he said. "Whether you stand with us or not, we will not watch worlds die in silence." His words struck deep. Some delegates lowered their eyes, others sneered in disgust. But none offered support. Not one. When the vote was called, the decision was final. By a wide margin, the Council voted to stay out of the conflict. They called it wisdom, they called it caution, but it was cowardice. The chamber lights dimmed as the vote sealed their fate. History would remember them as the ones who turned their backs. Ambassador Hale left the chamber without another word. His steps echoed down the long corridor, heavy but unshaken. The moment he reached his ship, he sent the message to Earth. "The Council refuses. We stand alone." But humanity was ready for that answer. They had expected nothing less. On Earth, the news spread quickly. Citizens filled the streets, furious at the cowardice of the galaxy. Old veterans of Earth's wars shook their heads. "We fight alone." Again, one muttered, just like always. But in their voices there was not despair, there was pride, because humans had never needed permission to fight. In the war rooms, admirals spoke quietly. "The Council hides behind walls," one said, "but we were born on a death world. Fear does not guide us, survival does." The order was given. The fleet would depart with or without allies. Earth's banners were raised, and every soldier knew the truth. They were not going for politics, they were not going for glory. They were going for the dying voices that had called across the void. Far above, in the dark reaches of space, the alien SOS played again, static and screams, broken words, the sound of worlds falling. And somewhere in that signal, there was still hope. Hope that someone would come, and humans were already on their way. The fleet of fire in the shipyards above Earth, silence broke with thunder. Engines roared to life, forging light across the black sky. One by one, the great human warships awakened, their shadows stretching like giants over the planet. They had been waiting, sleeping. But now the call had come, and humanity's answer was fire. The Resolute drifted from its berth. armor blackened and scarred from battles long past. The Iron Dawn followed, massive cannons glowing as power flowed through its veins. The Valiant lifted slow, like a predator uncoiling from rest. Dozens more joined them until Earth's orbit shimmered with steel and fire. Together, they formed a fleet that carried the will of a Deathworld, a fleet born not of fear, but of fury on the decks. Soldiers prepared in silence. Some whispered prayers. Others tightened armor straps, their eyes steady. Young recruits looked to the veterans, and the veterans gave no speeches. They only nodded. The kind of nod that meant you know what must be done. These men and women were not going to save their own kind. They were going to save strangers, and that made their resolve even stronger. Across the fleet, whispers carried. They say the council refused, a soldier muttered. Of course they did, came the reply. They call us Deathworlders, but when the galaxy cries, who answers? We do. In the command halls, admirals studied the maps of star systems. Lines stretched across dark holograms, marking the fastest routes to the SOS. We are outnumbered, one officer said. Whoever destroyed that colony has a fleet waiting for us. Admiral Reeves only shook his head. Then we will burn them out of the stars, he said, his voice calm. Because Deathworlders did not retreat, they endured. That was their nature. The people of Earth gathered in cities below, staring into the night sky. They watched as the warships moved like stars being torn from the heavens. Children pointed, parents whispered, veterans saluted. For them, it was more than a mission. It was proof that humanity still carried fire in its heart. The old wounds of history, wars, betrayals, forgotten battles, were remembered now with pride. Because from that pain, they had become what the galaxy feared most, survivors who never surrendered. In the barracks of the Iron Dawn, a young recruit named Carter sat with trembling hands. Beside him, an older sergeant leaned close, his voice low. Fear is good, the sergeant said. Fear keeps you alive, but remember this, son. Out there, those people are screaming for us. They've got no one else. We answer no matter the cost. Carter nodded, and in that moment his fear hardened into resolve. Above Earth, the fleet aligned, engines glowing bright. Their formation stretched like a wall of fire, ready to carve across the void. The order came from Admiral Reeves, a single word that echoed across every ship. Launch. Hyperspace drives flared, bending the stars into streaks of light. The void rippled, swallowing the fleet, and in that instant humanity left behind the safety of its home. They carried no promises of victory, only the promise that they would fight until the last hull burned, until the last soldier fell, until the last voice of the SOS was answered. Back in the Galactic Council chamber, delegates watched the departure on hidden screens. They whispered among themselves, some mocking, others uneasy. They are fools, one alien hissed. They will all die, another said. But not all voices agreed. A quiet ambassador whispered, or perhaps they will remind us why we fear them. In the far reaches of space, the signal continued to echo, static screams, broken pleas for help. And with every passing second, the fleet of fire drew closer, closer to the graveyard of worlds, closer to the enemy that had already broken, civilizations, closer to the moment when the galaxy would learn that Deathworlders did not answer with mercy, they answered with war. The silent graveyard, the human fleet burst out of hyperspace, engines dimming as the black returned. For a moment there was silence. Then the horror unfolded before them. The system that had sent the SOS was no longer alive. Planets burned, their surfaces scarred with firestorms, cities shattered into glass and dust. Broken moons drifted like corpses spinning slowly in the void. The stars themselves seemed dimmer, as if light refused to touch this place. On the bridge of the Resolute, Admiral Reeves stood in silence. Around him, officers froze, their screens filling with images of devastation. One whispered, "Dear God." But no one else spoke, because there were no words for what they saw. The scanners caught fragments of ships, alien designs torn apart, drifting in silence. Some still carried faint life signs. Others were only wreckage. Human rescue teams launched immediately, flying small craft through fields of debris. They searched every broken hull, calling out, hoping for survivors. In the wreck of a massive colony ship, they found them, huddled in dark corners, terrified, wounded, their eyes wide with disbelief. The aliens trembled when the humans approached. They had expected death, not help. One whispered, in a broken voice, "You came," and the human medic only nodded, "We always come." Across the fleet, survivors were pulled from shattered stations and burning husks. Some wept, some screamed, some clung to their rescuers. They spoke of what had attacked them. They called the enemy shadows, monsters that destroyed without mercy. Whole cities, burned in seconds, fleets crushed in minutes. "They do not speak," one survivor sobbed. "They do not stop. They only kill." The human crews listened and their jaws tightened, because if this was true, then the fight ahead would not be just a battle. It would be war against a force that knew nothing but destruction. In the command chamber, Admiral Reeves studied the readings. No signs of the enemy yet, only echoes of their passage, weapon scars on metal, radiation trails fading into the void. "They are still here," he said quietly, "somewhere close." The rescued aliens shivered as if they could still feel the presence. One, a trembling elder with cracked skin, pointed to the dark side of a shattered moon. "They wait," he whispered. "They watch." Every human officer turned to their screens. The scanners pulsed, sending out waves of light through the system. For long moments, there was nothing, only silence. Then, the shadows moved. Shapes emerged from behind the moon, massive, jagged, wrong. Not smooth ships like those of the council races, not structured or beautiful. These were nightmares of metal, spines jutting from their hulls, glowing veins pulsing like living creatures. Their numbers spread across the black, a swarm too vast to count. The humans froze for only a heartbeat. Then the alarms began to scream. On the bridge of the Iron Dawn, Captain Vera stood tall. "So this is the enemy," she muttered. Then, "Let them see who we are." Orders rang across the fleet, weapons charging, shields rising, fighters launching into the dark. In the wreckage below, the rescued aliens looked up through viewports, their eyes wide as the human fleet aligned into formation. For the first time in their lives, they felt something new, not only fear but hope. Because the Deathworlders did not tremble, they prepared to fight. The enemy ships pulsed with unnatural light, their weapons glowing red, and in that moment, the system became a battlefield. The survivors wept, the council far away turned their eyes aside, and the humans, steady and unbroken, stood before the darkness, because Deathworlders had answered the SOS, and in the silent graveyard, the fire of humanity was about to meet the shadows. Fire against darkness. The silent graveyard shook as the first shots were fired. Human cannons lit up the void, beams of white fire cutting through the black. The enemy answered with streaks of crimson light, tearing into the wreckage of old, ships vaporizing entire chunks of rock. The graveyard was no longer silent, it was alive with war. The Resolute led the charge, her guns roaring. The Iron Dawn flanked her, launching squadrons of fighters into the swarm. The Valiant hung back, its long-range cannons thundering with every strike. Each ship was a beast of steel, moving with deadly precision. But the enemy came in endless waves, ships jagged and alive, their spines glowing as if filled with burning blood. In the chaos, human soldiers pushed harder. Fighters darted between enemy hulks, dropping torpedoes that ripped holes into their twisted armor. Some exploded in showers of black fire. But for every one destroyed, more appeared from the void. "They just keep coming," a pilot cried over comms, his voice cracking. "Then we keep killing," his commander barked. There was no retreat, only fire. On the bridge of the Resolute, Admiral Reeves stood calm, his eyes sharp. "Focus fire on their center," he ordered. "Break their formation." Cannons turned, missiles launched, and the human fleet moved as one. They slammed into the enemy's heart, tearing ships apart with brutal efficiency. Alien survivors hidden in the wreckage watched in awe. They had never seen a fleet fight like this. Not with fear, not with hesitation, but with pure, relentless fury. The enemy struck back, unleashing weapons that bent the void. Beams of crimson light ripped through shields, slicing across hulls. One human destroyer took a hit, her engines burning out, fire spilling across her decks. Her captain shouted one last command before the flames consumed him. Ram them. The destroyer turned, engines screaming, and slammed into an enemy cruiser, both ships exploding in a sun-bright fireball. The blast shook the system, leaving silence in its wake. For a heartbeat, the humans faltered. Then their resolve hardened even more. In the barracks of the Iron Dawn, Sergeant Cole strapped into his seat, his face pale but steady. He looked at his squad and said, "Remember this. Deathworlders do not run. If this is the end, then we make it their end too." The soldiers roared in reply, their voices echoing in the steel walls. The battle dragged on, hours of endless fire. The enemy ships showed no fear, no retreat, only hunger to destroy. But the humans matched them, blow for blow. Every time a ship fell, another surged forward to cover the gap. Every time an enemy, weapon-charged, a human fighter swarmed to disrupt it. It was not order, it was survival. And survival was something humans had mastered. Then the enemy changed. At the center of their swarm, a massive ship moved forward, darker and larger than the rest. Its hull glowed with red veins, its core pulsing with power. Scanners screamed warnings. "They are charging something," an officer shouted. On the screens, the ship's spine split open, revealing a weapon vast enough to cut a planet in half. The human fleet froze for a moment, watching the impossible take shape. The survivors screamed in terror, hiding their faces. And on the Resolute, Admiral Reeves whispered the truth. "It's a planet killer." The weapon began to glow brighter, the void itself trembling with energy. If it fired, not even the fleet would survive. Orders rang out across the human ships, desperate and fast. "We must stop it. Throw everything we have." And so they did. Every cannon, every missile, every fighter turned toward the beast in the dark. The humans charged, their ships burning, their voices fierce, because the galaxy had abandoned this system. But Deathworlders had come, and they would fight the darkness itself, even if it meant burning with it. The last stand. The giant enemy ship loomed in the dark, its weapon glowing brighter with each passing second. The scanners screamed warnings, the energy readings rising beyond anything human systems had ever measured. If it fired, the fleet would be gone, and the survivors they had saved would vanish in fire. There was no time left. On the Resolute, Admiral Reeves clenched his fists. "All ships, focus everything on that weapon," he commanded. The fleet obeyed, unleashing a storm of fire. Missiles streaked through the black. Cannons thundered. Fighters dived into the swarm. But the giant ship did not fall. Its shields pulsed like molten walls, deflecting most of the human fire. The enemy swarm pressed harder, ships closing in from all sides. Human vessels burned, some torn apart in seconds. The Iron Dawn shook as enemy blasts tore across her hull. Alarm screaming. Captain Vera stood firm, her voice steady. "We hold, we fight, we are Deathworlders, we do not break." Her crew roared in reply, even as fire spread across the decks. In the chaos, Sergeant Cole and his squad were thrown into emergency defense. Enemy boarding craft smashed into the side of the Iron Dawn, ripping holes through her steel. The aliens poured inside, monstrous and jagged, claws of burning metal cutting through bulkheads. Cole raised his rifle, his voice cold, "Hold the line." The corridors shook with battle as humans met monsters face to face. Steel against claw, fire against shadow, screams echoing through the ship. Back on the Resolute, Reeves knew the truth. Their weapons were not enough. The planet killer would fire soon. He turned to his officers, his voice low but unshaken. "One ship will not come back." The room fell silent. He pointed to the screen, to the massive glowing weapon. One ship must ram it, get close enough to tear it apart from within. There was no argument, because they all understood. It was sacrifice or extinction. The order went across the fleet. The Valiant, heavily damaged, her engines barely holding, answered first. Her captain's voice came through the comms, steady and calm. "We will do it. Tell Earth we did not run." His crew saluted, knowing what it meant. The Valiant turned, engines burning brighter than ever before, pushing through enemy fire. Enemy ships swarmed her, claws tearing at her hull. But she did not stop. Every cannon on her decks fired until they overheated and melted. Every missile launched until her bays were empty. Still, she pressed on, straight toward the heart of the beast. The giant enemy weapon reached full charge, light spilling across the void. The survivors wept, certain the end had come. But then the Valiant struck. Her hull slammed into the glowing core. For a heartbeat there was silence, and then she exploded. The blast ripped through the void, tearing the massive ship open, shattering its weapon. Flames poured across the swarm. Enemy vessels thrown aside like leaves in a storm. The shockwave slammed into the human fleet, shaking every hull. But they endured. They had lived through the fire of their own Deathworld, and they would not fall here on the Resolute. Admiral Reeves bowed his head. "The Valiant lives forever," he whispered. But even as the crew cheered, the battle was not over. The swarm still moved, thousands of enemy ships pressing in, enraged, burning with fury. The humans had bought time, but the fight was far from won. Sergeant Cole, covered in blood and smoke, dragged his last soldier behind cover. His rifle was empty, his body broken, but his eyes burned. "We hold," he growled. "As long as one of us breathes, we hold." The word spread through the surviving soldiers. A chant in the dark. "We hold, we hold, we hold." The enemy closed in, fire raining across the human fleet. The Iron Dawn burned. The Resolute groaned under endless hits. Survivors prayed. Officers screamed orders. And above them all, the swarm circled like vultures preparing for the killing blow. But humans did not surrender. They had faced extinction before and still endured. This would be no different. The fleet tightened formation, ships locking together, wounded vessels shielding the stronger ones. They were battered, they were bleeding, but they were still there. Still fighting, still burning, and in the heart of the chaos, one truth became clear. This was humanity's last stand, and they would make it count. Mercy denied. The human fleet burned in the dark, but it still stood. Wreckage floated all around them. Fires lit the void like dying stars. The swarm circled, thousands of enemy ships still pressing, their rage endless. The Valiant was gone. The Iron Dawn crippled, the Resolute scarred. But Deathworlders did not fall. They only fought harder. On the bridge of the Resolute, Admiral Reeves raised his head. "This is it," he said, his voice like steel. "No mercy, no retreat. We finish. This here?" His words spread across the fleet, carried into every deck, every fighter, every soldier's heart. The Deathworlders roared as one, a cry of fury that shook the void itself. The humans changed formation, ships tightening into a spearhead, the Resolute at the front, the crippled vessels shielding the flanks. They turned, not away but straight into the heart of the swarm. Cannons flared, missiles screamed, fighters blazed through enemy lines like sparks in a storm. It was not defense anymore. It was vengeance. The swarm pressed, shrieking with alien fury. But the humans were worse. Every strike was precise, every sacrifice brutal, every move made with deadly intent. The survivors watching from shattered colonies saw it. They saw humans fight like demons, faces lit with fire, voices filled with rage. And they realized the truth. The Deathworlders had not come to show kindness. They had come to make sure the enemy never rose again. One by one, enemy ships fell, torn apart, burned to ash, the spearhead cut deep, ripping through the swarm. Human warships exploded too, but even in death they took enemies with them. A cruiser rammed 2 enemy destroyers. A frigate detonated its own core to clear the path. Every sacrifice was fire, every death a weapon. At the center, the massive enemy flagship still burned from the Valiant's strike, but it lived, its core glowing faintly. Repairing, Admiral Reeves saw it, his eyes cold. "That thing must die," he said. He turned to his crew. "All guns, all missiles, everything we have now." The fleet obeyed, unleashing every last weapon in their arsenals. Missiles screamed. Cannons thundered. Fighters dived like arrows of flame. The enemy flagship shook, hull cracking, shields failing. light spilling from its wounds. Still it tried to fight, lashing out with burning claws of energy. But humans did not stop. Not until nothing was left. The final barrage struck its core. For a moment the void turned white. The flagship exploded in a storm of fire, a sun born and killed in seconds. The shockwave tore through the swarm, shattering what remained. The enemy broke at last, fragments, scattering into the endless night. Silence returned to the silent graveyard. Only human ships remained, battered but unbroken. The survivors wept, some with joy, some with fear. They had been saved, but they had also seen the true face of the Deathworlders, not saviors of mercy, but warriors of fire. On the bridge of the Resolute, Admiral Reeves gave the final word. "Signal to Earth," he said quietly. "Tell them we answered the call." He paused, his eyes dark. "And tell them the galaxy will remember this day." The message was sent, carried across the stars. A simple truth that would echo forever. The galaxy had begged for help. The Deathworlders had answered, and they had given no mercy, only fire.